Hello, all you gorgeous, sexy viewers. Once again, it's the time of the year when we celebrate love and romance, with a holiday named after a Catholic saint and usually symbolized by a Renaissance-era image named after a Roman god. Fun fact, like the majority of the Roman gods, old Cupid here also has a Greek name, and it's the source of our modern English word erotic. This holiday is also the best thing to happen to florists, greeting card companies, and candy makers since Rose is cardstock and chocolate. Keeping this whole romance idea in mind, and taking into consideration that the majority of the time it happens between a man and a woman, with all love and respect to my LGBT brothers and sisters, I thought I would do a video on how these two groups normally interact. Unfortunately, I found this instead.
I'm David Brockway. I'm the manager of the Great Men Project.
Hi, David Brockway. I'm Susie Wolf, fledgling YouTuber and advocate for sanity. So what is this Great Men Project? Is it a program where you help boys get a leg up by reinforcing the importance of education and critical thinking? Hint, if you actually think it is, you haven't been paying attention to this channel.
We deliver workshops on gender equality to teenage boys in schools across London and the South East.
You mean like how in the vast majority of first world countries, it's literally against the law to treat women differently from men in areas like employment?
Our topics include sexual harassment, homophobia, pornography, and consent.
You seriously think you need workshops to explain that consent is good, homophobia and sexual harassment are bad, and... Wait, did you say pornography? You now have my undivided attention. After all...
Especially, we talk about masculinity, feminism, and what it really means to be a man.
Oh, son of my sister. Look, just for the record, let's get a few things straight. For starters, in its purest form, feminism is exactly what you see here, the promotion of women's rights, which I'm all for obvious reasons. This has nothing whatsoever to do with homophobia or the rights of LGBT people, unless they happen to be born without a Y chromosome, who would fall under the more inclusive category of egalitarianism, which is equal rights for everybody. I personally feel that this is the direction modern feminism should have taken once it became illegal to discriminate against women in a good chunk of the world, and many feminists agree and in fact hold this view. However, there's also a disturbing number of them, largely the more vocal ones, who have instead attempted to steer the feminist movement in modern times more toward a promotion of misandry. If that word sounds disturbingly familiar, it's probably because it is very similar to the word misogyny. So similar, in fact, that they share the exact same definition with the sole exception of one word. That fact in and of itself should tell you that the two things are equally bad. If for some reason it doesn't, I would like to strongly suggest looking up the terms double standard and hypocrite.
Adult men don't really talk about these issues very much. We want to get that conversation normalised starting at an early age.
Right, get them while they're young, before they have the analytical skills and real-world experience to properly consider what all you're telling them. Wait, why does this sound familiar?
We use participatory activities such as word association games. These allow the boys to explore the stereotypes that might be in their heads. We'll ask them to talk about the first words that come into their head when they think of a certain topic.
Ooh, I love those! Let's play one now. What's the first thing you think of when I say, oh, I don't know, how about idiot?
David Brockway.
That's a little more telling than I had planned to get. Okay, how about entertainment?
Pornography.
Stress relief?
Pornography.
Kumquats?
Pornography.
Something you'd like to get.
Pornography.
You didn't let me finish. Something you'd like to get but don't think you ever will.
Sexual consent. For instance, when we're asked to think about men, they may come up with brave, strong, or daring. For women, they may come up with gentle, kind, and caring. So then we ask how and why. What causes these stereotypes? Where do the boys get ideas like, it's weak for men to cry, or men are strong, women are weak?
Whoa, pump the brakes there, Dave. Where on earth did you give the conclusions you just said from the examples you just gave? I think if anybody needs to review the stereotypes floating around in their head, it might be you.
Most of the boys have never had conversations like this before. Our most powerful moments are when we have light bulb moments, when boys have the opportunity through talking to each other to realise that some of these ideas that they think they know are actually a result of conditioning and the world around them.
I think I get it. So it's kind of like them feeling like they're human garbage for committing the unforgivable sin of being born straight and cisgendered with a Y chromosome. Kind of like you're doing.
Toxic masculinity is talked about a lot these days. We would define it as a set of negative behaviours that men think they have to follow in order to be proper men.
And yet the vast majority of real men, i.e. men who exist in the real world as opposed to straw man fallacies, don't engage in these behaviors or think they're necessary. Personally, I think we'd be better served to focus on toxic behavior, which I define as belittling or making assumptions about someone based on arbitrary factors, and includes such things as racism, homophobia, misogyny, and misandry, among other things. In other words, instead of just focusing on one group, how about if all people just be a little less douchey to people who are different from them? By the way, if that sounds way too obvious, consider the fact that it had to come from somebody who's a different species.
On top of the litany of negative consequences that these behaviours have for women and girls, there are also many negative consequences for men and boys. At the top of this list would be mental ill health and suicide. Suicide rates in this country are currently much higher for men than they are for women.
Gee, that wouldn't have anything to do with the human garbage stereotype I mentioned a moment ago, would it?
In our workshops, we find that boys have a lot of difficulty expressing their emotions, accepting emotional vulnerability, and admitting to any form of weakness.
Based on what I've heard, that's called being human. A lot of girls have those same problems. But you don't do anything to help them, do you, you sexist pig? Viewers, please tell me you saw how ridiculous that sounded.
Our workshops encourage boys to critique phrases such as man up and take it like a man, which are really saying boys don't cry and boys don't ask for help when they're feeling down.
I was always given to think that it meant you're in a rough spot, so be ready to try harder and don't give up. And no offense meant to anybody, but while technically more politically correct, person up just doesn't have the same ring to it.
The phrase man up is particularly important for us. It's two words that put together mean absolutely nothing, but any man can tell you that when told to do so, they know exactly what was expected of them at that time.
Yeah, and so can any woman. Dave's being sexist again.
For years, the responsibility of dealing with these problems has been on women, grappling with sexism, sexual harassment, and harassment at work.
Because women never commit sexual harassment when they're in positions of power, except for all the ones that do. But at least there's no social stigma against men for reporting it, except that there is.
We feel that solving these issues is equally the responsibility of men. That's why it's so important to get these conversations started early, to bring boys into this discussion so that they can have a chance to not take forward those negative ideas and stereotypes.
They'll just take forward all the negative ideas and stereotypes that you put in their heads instead. I fully agree that all parties involved should share responsibility for solving the problem, but it seems to me like your method is less likely to actually accomplish that goal than to simply make it more common the other way around.
One of our most difficult topics is pornography. Our approach is not to shame anyone, but to ask questions, such as, is this a good place to learn about sex? Can this be degrading? And where's the consent in this?
Let's address your questions one at a time, shall we?
Is this a good place to learn about sex?
Depends on the porn you're watching.
Can this be degrading?
Ditto.
And where's the consent in this?
That would be in the employment contract they willingly signed, wherein they agreed to be compensated X to do Y under Z conditions. And no, the Z does not necessarily mean zero, it's just a variable.
We aim to educate the boys about the porn industry, to tell them that it can often be unsafe and coercive for women.
Gee, what a surprise. Somebody featured on my channel trying to sound like an expert on a subject he clearly hasn't done any research on. Dave, it'll probably surprise you, but not my mega smart super sexy viewers. That according to an independent study of the adult entertainment industry, Women were found to have more business influence, greater creative control, and higher incomes than men, the primary exception being companies that produced material targeted exclusively to gay men, which a considerable number of women simply chose to have no part of. It's also worth taking into consideration what's actually involved in being an actor in an adult film. A female porn actor is generally required to be in good physical condition and express whatever emotion, whatever passes for a script, calls for, usually pleasure, and possibly have a considerable amount of lubrication readily available. A male porn actor is regularly required to get a part of his body to respond on command that is famous for not responding on command. So, who's got the worst part of this deal again?
That the things on display are rarely representative of a mutually pleasurable sexual experience.
Once again, considering that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different niches and innumerable personal preferences, it depends on what porn you're watching, which kind of raises the question of just what kind of stuff you get into.
Sometimes the boys you work with go back to a home environment that is contrary to all of the things we've discussed.
So they go home to environments where they're loved and respected for who they are, instead of being ridiculed and guilt-tripped for how they were born?
What they are taught and learn from the media is the total opposite of discussions they had with us.
Taking into consideration the slow but steady increase in man-bashing in popular media, I have a suspicion that what the boys learn from media and in your discussions line up better than some of my pose transitions. Wait, how'd I get over here? Put me back, will ya? Thanks. Before I wrap up, in addition to reminding you guys about the email and Discord information down in the description, I wanted to let you know that the musical clips used in this video feature the hilarious Andrew Metzger in the role of Trekkie Monster. I took the liberty of including a link to the full performance on his channel in the description, so go show him some love, will ya? Also, on a personal note, Senpai noticed me! Sorry, had to get that out of my system. Until next time, stay sane, everybody, and remember... Smoochies! If you like what I do, but want to see somebody do it way better, be sure to check out Sir Sick, the Social Inequality Crusader. Links in the description below. And tell him Susie sent you.